Okay, whatever your Bitcoin target is for this cycle, I want you to double it. Okay, now I want you to double it again. Now look, I don't know what the number that you have is, but I can tell you for sure that whatever number you have in your head right now, that number is too low. I can promise you that. Now, if you don't believe me, what you need to do is you need to watch the show until the end. And at the end, let me know if I was right, because whatever the number is that you've got, I bet you that after watching the show, you'll believe that that number was too conservative. This is going to be like the biggest Bitcoin show you've ever seen. So let's get into it. This was one of those shows that as I was prepping for the show, I was like, shit, you know, maybe I am a little bit too bearish on the Bitcoin price. Or maybe I'm not as excited as I should be about the Bitcoin price. Because as I was putting the pieces together, I realized the targets that I had are way too conservative. And I think the same thing is going to happen to you when you watch the show. Now, today is going to be mainly about Bitcoin, but there's a whole lot of other altcoin alpha at the end. But I think we've got to talk about the big daddy today because the winds of change are here. And I think today is going to be a very, very, very big day for Bitcoin. In fact, I actually think that we could actually even get a number of maybe 98,000 or 100,000 tomorrow. And I'm going to show you exactly how that happens. So massive, massive, massive show today. And probably one of the shows that I've been the most excited to make in a long, long, long time. And I think as we go along in the show, maybe you guys should let me know if you share the same excitement as I share in the show. Really one of the best shows that I've ever done. Someone says the audio is low. Is the audio low? Can it be that the audio is low? It's impossible. It's impossible that it can be. Anyway, listen, if you're as excited as I am, destroy and obliterate the like button. Another thing which I am more excited about is that we are now 78.2% subscribed, people that watch the show. So if you're not already subscribed, we grew by like 1,500 subscribers since yesterday. So incredible, incredible growth. Join the best community in the world. Anyway, I don't want to waste time on anything else. I just want to go straight into the alpha because there's massive, massive, massive alpha. Let's look at where the alpha actually comes in from. So let's look at the charts. What you can see in the charts is that Bitcoin was trying to push its way up again. So we got to 92,689. It looks like there's a lot of upward momentum coming into Bitcoin. It's not only Bitcoin, it's also, if you look at the total market cap, we broke through the total market cap. We broke through this level over here, and it looks like we're going to break through and go into price discovery on the total market cap. And the same thing for total 3, which is the total excluding Bitcoin and ETH. That is now touching this level and actually broke through this level again. And I think that if you look at this tweet, I think it's probably right where he says Bitcoin is mirroring the behavior of the last 2 cycles and it's consolidating. And if history repeats, we'll see a breakout in the next day or two, targeting maybe even up to $150,000, followed by that correction. And of course, you know that I've got the thesis of the correction also on my radar. And I've told you guys that I'm starting to accumulate cash and I'm going to start showing you my cash meter every single day. I'm on 8% cash. My target's 30% cash before we get the inevitable dip. Now, some people are saying, well, why are you so confident we're going to get a dip? I think probably the best way to look at it is to look at it like this. When you invert the scale, if you saw an altcoin that looked like that, I think what you'd say is that at some stage this is going to bounce, right? This is what happens when you switch the axis. So now I'm going from 0 all the way down. So this is why I'm still accumulating cash. But ultimately, I'm still very bullish that this is very much part of the parabolic move that is happening or is about to happen on Bitcoin. Now, the big news today. So we have an amazing big story today, which I don't think a lot of people have actually factored in. And probably it is the reason why this chart actually went down like that. Or actually, if we switch it back, it went up like that. The reason for that is that today we have a new financial instrument launching in crypto. And that new financial instrument that's launching in crypto is Bitcoin ETF options. Okay, so an option is the option to buy or sell a product or an investment at a future point in time. And today we're getting Bitcoin ETF options. In other words, you can now take an option to buy a share or a unit in a Bitcoin ETF at a future point in time. And so those Bitcoin options are now listing are now set to hit on the NASDAQ today. Now, this is a very, very, very big announcement for many reasons. I mean, the first reason why it's a very, very, very big announcement is because we're getting another financial instrument on Bitcoin. And we want as many financial instruments on Bitcoin. It started off with the futures, then it went into the ETFs, then it went into Bitcoin futures ETF or futures ETFs, then it went into normal ETFs, and now we're getting options on the ETFs. Now, why is that such a big deal, and why could that cause the price of Bitcoin actually to go up? Well, I'm going to read it to you off a tweet because it explains it very, very well. This guy says, option trading for BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust starts tomorrow, marking a new era for Bitcoin ETF derivatives. Here's what could happen. It's called a gamma squeeze. Now, how a gamma squeeze works is when we as investors buy a call option on Bitcoin, the market makers hedge. So what the market maker does is it goes and purchases a Bitcoin. So then the market maker sells you an option, but actually buys the actual physical Bitcoin. And the same thing's going to happen with the Bitcoin ETF. If a lot of people believe that the price of Bitcoin can go up and they want to buy options on the Bitcoin, on the BlackRock ETF, then when they buy the option, the market maker, to hedge his risk, goes and buys the underlying asset, which in this case will be BlackRock's iShares Trust. When that happens, that would force the iShares Trust to go and actually buy Bitcoin. And that would effectively create buying pressure on Bitcoin. Now, where could this go wrong? This could go wrong in a market where a lot of people are buying options because they think the price of Bitcoin is going to go down in a long period of time. But if this scenario plays out, there is a real prediction that within 24 hours of this launch, if we get the buying frenzy, then this could take the Bitcoin price to 98,000, maybe a week later to 105,000. So I think what's interesting to understand here is that this could be a massive catalyst because you're starting to understand that this one financial instrument that's actually being launched on Bitcoin can actually create a huge buying frenzy of the underlying asset. And this is, I think, what is causing, or what was causing, the massive move up in Bitcoin. And I think that I agree very, very, very much with 𝗥𝗢𝗏𝗣𝗧 here, where he says, look, we're in phase 3 of the market. We're in the parabolic phase of the cycle now. History has shown that this cycle is going to last, or this part of the bull market is going to last about 300 days. So that's more or less where it's at. It's going to last about 300 days. We've got about 300 days left of this. And today is day 14 of the parabolic phase. So we're in day 14 of 300 days in the parabolic phase. So interesting, when I looked at day 14, and today is obviously the 19th of November, what you realize is that something changed 14 days ago. And that change that happened 14 days ago literally started the parabolic thing on Bitcoin. You can actually see it in the chart. Like if you go back, this is the weekly, but if you go back on the daily chart and you kind of look at where this parabola actually started, you can see the parabola actually started there. And ironically, that is the 5th of November. That is the day where Trump was elected into office. And it really feels like this was when something changed for Bitcoin. I mean, just look how beautifully it stacks up with the chart. So you had the suspicions that Trump was going to be president. Then you had the decline and the nerves before. And then bouncing exactly on that trend line was when everything changed. The trend changed. The momentum changed. Now, you can see it in the chart, right? And I mean, you probably couldn't have scripted it better because you can see that that's what you call a trend line. The trend was broken. We retested the trend and then we disappeared from that trend one last time. And now we're completely in like this area of price discovery. So what actually changed on that day? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that Trump actually became the president on that day. And I think that ushered in a completely new era. So when I say a completely new era, I don't know if you guys have been watching the headlines. We got the options headline today, but that wasn't the only headline that we got. I mean, we saw a headline this morning that Donald Trump's media is looking to acquire a crypto exchange called 𝗥𝗘𝗦, believe it or not. So we've gone from a regulatory regime, which was kind of like hated crypto, to a regulatory regime where the president's media company is going to buy crypto exchanges. I mean, you got to let that sink in just for a second. Coming from Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, we're now moving to a point where Trump's media company is looking to buy a crypto exchange. You know, the thing with these headlines that I'm showing you now is that when you look at them individually, they're all very significant. Every single one of these headlines is very, very, very significant in their own right. When you combine them all, and I'm going to show you all the headlines now, but when you combine all of them, then you realize that whatever you thought was going to happen to Bitcoin, 10 times more is going to happen. And that's why I was so confident in the beginning of the show where I said, like, you know what, like, I don't really know what your target is for Bitcoin. Whatever it is, double it again. So my target for Bitcoin was 200,000. Then I doubled it again. I said 400,000. And then I doubled it again, 800,000. And I was like, still too conservative. That is what happens. And the reason why that happens is because, as I said, when you take the headlines in isolation, they're big. But when you take them in together, they create this explosion. And that's why I'm so confident about my thesis. So, I mean, the first headline is that Trump's media site's actually going to acquire a trading platform. We've gone from a world where Coinbase was struggling to meet the SEC, right? They were struggling to meet the SEC. The CEO and chief legal officer of Coinbase had to make this embarrassing video to the SEC.
To the chair, other commissioners, and staff of the Securities and Exchange Commission, I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak directly to you. My name is 𝗪𝗥𝗬𝗣𝗧. I'm Coinbase's chief legal officer. And with me is Brian Armstrong.
So they made this whole video about how, because they couldn't get a meeting with the SEC. And so they made this whole video.
But it doesn't have to come to that. We welcome a true dialogue about a workable path forward for our industry. Now I'll hand it back over to Paul.
Coinbase has been talking to the SEC about our business for many years now, including sharing our legal views on our asset listing and staking services. We have repeatedly asked the SEC for its own views on how securities laws might
So we went from a world, I mean, where
apply to Coinbase and our industry. And to be candid, we've mostly gotten silence in response. But
they got silence. So we went from a world where the SEC wouldn't even meet with the biggest exchange in the United States to headlines this morning that Donald Trump is actually meeting with Brian Armstrong around consulting, around creating legislation and innovation and effectively making the US the crypto behemoth in the world. We went from a world where the ruling party, which was the Democrats, were running on an anti-crypto re-election campaign to a world where Senator Loomis declares that we are building a pro-crypto army in Congress. And indeed, they are actually building a crypto army in Congress. It's not only Congress. If you look at this photo of the president and you could say his closest advisors, just look at this photo and let's just quickly go through it. So you've got the president over here. We know he's a complete crypto degen. One of the people that's not in this photo is J.D. Vance, which is the vice president. Now, we know that J.D. Vance owns NFTs and owns at least $250,000 to $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. But I actually think that it's way, way, way more. Then you've got Elon Musk. We know that Elon Musk holds a lot of Bitcoin. I mean, he holds Bitcoin and Dogecoin. I mean, you probably remember this.
I still own a bunch of Dogecoin, and SpaceX owns a bunch of Bitcoin. But
so you've got a bunch of Dogecoin, a bunch of Bitcoin. And then again, you look at this picture, you've got RFK. RFK has declared that not only is he all in, but he's actually put most of his wealth into Bitcoin.
I'm a huge supporter of Bitcoin. I was here a year ago at the other Bitcoin conference. I went home with most of my wealth into Bitcoin, so I'm full.
I mean, he literally says that he put most of his wealth into Bitcoin. You've got Trump Jr., you've got Vivek, who's a massive Bitcoin guy. But I mean, this is just the people that are very, very close and around the president. We've gone from a world where the head of the SEC was extremely, extremely, extremely hostile to crypto, to a world where the leading candidates for SEC chair include a Robinhood chief legal officer, Hester Peirce, who is she's actually known as the crypto mom in Wall Street. Can you believe it? To a world where the leading frontrunner for the position of SEC chair is the former Binance CEO. And let me tell you that Brian Brooks, I mean, you can see that, I think right now, yeah. So right now, Brian Brooks, who's the former CEO of Binance US and a massive, massive, massive crypto proponent who really, really, really understands crypto and has testified in front of Congress.
So the characteristic of Web 1, if people remember their original AOL account, was an ability to look in a curated walled garden at a set of content that was not interactive but was presented to you on
So
AOL.
he testified, and
you could not only read content, but and 2 or 3 other companies. What makes Web 3 different is the ability to own the actual network. And that's what crypto assets themselves represent, is an ownership stake in an underlying network. So when you hear people talk about, for example, layer 1 tokens, what they mean
this is potentially the head of the SEC under Trump. So, I mean, you've gone from a world where you've got Gary Gensler in the SEC to potentially one of these 5 candidates, of which 3 we know are extremely, extremely, extremely pro-crypto. And the former CFTC chair, who's Chris Giancarlo, we kind of know that he's very much a complete crypto person. So that is that. You also have a pro-crypto Senate and a pro-crypto House of Representatives in the United States. So when you look at them, when you break down the actual numbers, 205 versus 99 and 14 versus 8. So, I mean, you know, when you take each one of these headlines individually, they all look amazing. But when you put them all together, you're like, holy shit, guys, come on. And then the last thing that I've got for you guys is that Elon Musk endorses 𝗪𝗢𝗕𝗏 for Treasury Secretary, and this guy owns hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin. This is where we're at. And I mean, if I remind you where we were just 15 days ago, the Democrats were very, very, very much in power, and we didn't actually know what actually happened. I see some people saying Bitcoin has topped out. Let's see if you carry on. In fact, I actually don't think Bitcoin's topped out. In fact, I think it's the exact opposite. I think we are about to get a whole lot of momentum, and you can see it in the ETFs with the ETF numbers and with the aggressive growth of the ETFs. But I think the other place where we're getting huge momentum is Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor has gone on this absolute buying frenzy. He did come out and say that he wanted to raise $42 billion and to buy $42 billion worth of Bitcoin. And at the time, people thought, okay, well, he's being a little bit ambitious, right? Like, there's no way that he's going to buy $42 billion worth of Bitcoin. But then you fast forward 1 week later, literally 1 week later, and they've bought another $4.6 billion worth of Bitcoin. And they're raising another $1.7 billion right now in Bitcoin, because they have found this infinite money loop where they can borrow at very low or zero interest rates, and they can give their investors a massive return. So what MicroStrategy does is MicroStrategy takes out loans to buy Bitcoin with those loans and returns the returns to the loan holders. And it keeps repeating this cycle, and it effectively gets unlimited leverage to take on more Bitcoin with almost a zero liquidation price because of the way that the loans are actually structured. And so now what's happening is Michael Saylor is effectively conducting and has conducted the biggest Bitcoin purchase in history. I want you to hear this, and I want you to see where he's doing it, because it'll give you some more perspective. He's on the Patrick Bet-David podcast, which is effectively a normie podcast. It's not a crypto podcast. And he's telling them the following.
So the announcement this morning was from last week's activity. So that's 5 days in the marketplace. So we did about $2 billion the first week, and we did $4.6 billion the second
This is
week.
the biggest ever, biggest purchase.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest Bitcoin purchase ever. Yeah.
Yeah, because I see this here. August 2020, you made $250 million. September 2020, 175. December 2020, you bought 50 million. February 2021, you bought $1 billion. November 11, 2024, last week $2 billion, and then today $4.6 billion.
Yeah, so 6.6 billion since we had our quarterly results. So, I think it's like 41, 42 times we bought Bitcoin in that range. So ever since August of 2020.
So they bought $6.6 billion since they published their quarterly results, and they now have published another note to buy another 1.75. So this guy's on a mission to continue with this 42 billion. And not only is he on a mission, but now other companies are starting to pick up his playbook and say, well, if he's doing it, why can't we do it? And so Marathon announced a $700 million convertible note. Semler Scientific, small but $21 million. Metaplanet, which is the Japanese MicroStrategy, is doing exactly the same thing. Now, I mean, just a note here. Normally, with companies, you don't want other companies to be doing what you're doing because it's almost seen as competitors. But in this case, Michael Saylor wants to give his playbook to everyone so that everyone can do it. Because the more other people replicate his model, whether it be it in the US or anywhere else, the higher the price of Bitcoin will go because of the limited supply of Bitcoin, right? So it's like this ironic thing where I've never seen a business where you want your competitors to have all your IP. In this case, the more your competitors try and copy you, the higher the price of Bitcoin actually becomes. And so I think that what's going to happen is now Michael Saylor is going to try and spring up a whole lot of other micro strategies doing exactly the same thing. Because as they do and as they buy up more Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin just continues to go up and up and up. And because he has first mover advantage, in fact, not even first mover, but everybody who's in that game actually gains. And so that's a huge increase in momentum. And you can see all the headlines are out there. Marathon, Global Healthcare, they're basically all out there. So that is the increase in momentum. And you remember that we spoke about this thing called the Lindy effect. And the Lindy effect basically says that initially people are very, very, very skeptical to buy a new asset. But the longer the asset actually exists, the longer the future life acceptancy and the acceptability that people have. And so, as Wikipedia says, is a phenomenon by which the future life expectancy of some non-perishable things like a technology or an idea is proportional to their current age. The longer something exists, the more confidence people have that it will exist forever, and therefore they will land up paying more, right? And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. We're seeing this increase in momentum right now. Goldman Sachs disclosed that they bought $710 million. I'm reading you some headlines. There's hundreds of these. This is, ironically, one of the richest men in Mexico. And he says, see a list of reasons why Bitcoin is much better than buying real estate. There's no tax. There's no traffic. There's no tenants to evict. There's no torts. There's no trouble. There's no mayor confiscation. There's no weather risk. There's no corrosion. And there's no regulator. Instead, there is a divisible, indestructible, immortal, teleportable, programmable, divisible, musical, fungible, configurable asset. And so this is coming from one of the richest men in Mexico. You've also got a $1.4 trillion insurance and annuity association reports holding the ETFs. Paul Tudor Jones doubling down on his bet holding. So you can see that there's a massive, massive wave of adoption. Normies starting to realize this.
Imagine if Bitcoin becomes the only money worth anything. And then everybody's like, well, I don't have any of it. Well, your money's not worth shit. You got to get new money. You got to get money in Bitcoin.
That's what's going to happen.
And then there's only a certain amount of Bitcoin, right? Like the Bitcoin number is finite. Right.
Normies are starting to get
like,
it.
Maybe there's no Bitcoin for you.
Right.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
That's
like,
what's going to happen.
That's exactly, and this is the type of FOMO that's actually now hitting the market. And at the same time, you're getting the people that have sold who are regretting having sold, and that just almost like this is Chamat from All In. He was an early Bitcoin investor who claims that he made a $4 billion mistake by selling.
You know what I think about? I actually think about all the Bitcoin I sold.
Oof. Yeah,
I had Bitcoin. I had a bunch of Bitcoin in my funds when I managed outside capital.
Bitcoin and things like it is the equivalent of the red pill. Okay? We are entering a completely world of uncharted water right now.
Have you made any investments in Bitcoin?
So, I mean, I own Bitcoin in my hedge fund. I own Bitcoin in my fund. I own Bitcoin in my private account. It is a huge deal. It's a huge, huge, huge deal.
That's a $3 or $4 billion mistake and growing now because my partners at the time capitulated and I wanted to be a good team member and we distributed and it was profitable. But
so you're getting, the people that are buying and the people that are regretting actually selling. I think one of the people that's actually really, or one of the countries that's really regretting selling is the German government, who sold their decision at 54. I don't know if you remember the selling when the German government just kept selling and selling and selling their Bitcoin. And so what we're seeing now is we're seeing this massive, massive, massive period of adoption. And how this period of adoption is forecast to happen is effectively, it starts off with people like us, normies, OGs, OGs and normies. Then it goes to like the big names and the individuals like Chamat. And then it goes up to the institutions. And I think we're starting to see the beginning of the institutions and the companies buying this. And then it starts getting into states. And to that end, we're starting to see that states are actually buying. So Florida has already said that they bought Bitcoin. They wrote a very, very, very compelling letter saying Florida's economy is in its prime with triple bond A rating. If we were its own sovereign nation, we'd be the 16th largest economy globally. I'm writing to you today with some innovative spirit in mind. In recent speech in the Bitcoin 2024 conference, Donald Trump proposed the idea of a national stockpile of cryptocurrency. This comes, and he says this comes as the Communist Party of China inroads every day into the crypto world to grab control of the emerging market. And so they're talking about, and they actually landed up buying in Florida. And not only that, now that Trump has heard that these states are buying, he is making an executive order to have a strategic national Bitcoin reserves. And the reason why he's doing this is because he doesn't want to be beaten by the actual states, because there are now other states, which is like the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, that include that, and that's just one of them, but there's many, that wants to hold Bitcoin on their actual balance sheet. And so now there's a race between, in this case, the country and the state to say, look, Trump's apparently talking about passing an executive order to avoid being beaten by the state to actually do Bitcoin. Then you've got the matter of the Bitcoin strategic reserve in the United States. Okay, so initially we thought, okay, Trump came in with a whole lot of promises. There was a big debate as to whether Trump would honor those promises. I'll play you the promises.
This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done. If crypto is going to define the future, I want to be mined, minted, and made in the USA. It's going to be. It's not going to be made anywhere else. And if Bitcoin is going to the moon, as we say, it's going to the moon, I want America to be the nation that leads the way. And that's what's going to happen. I pledge to the Bitcoin community that the day I take the oath of office, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's anti-crypto crusade will be over. It will end. It'll be done. It'll be done. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler and appoint a new SEC chairman.
So, I mean, he came in on a whole lot of Bitcoin promises. One of them was that he'll have a Bitcoin reserve. And to be honest, I was quite skeptical of whether or not we would actually get this Bitcoin reserve. But now this is becoming a reality because now there is a Bitcoin Act. They don't really need bipartisan support because they actually have the House, the Senate, and the Congress. And so they believe now that they can make the Bitcoin Act and the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve a reality in the first 100 days. And then they're saying, okay, well, if we have the Bitcoin bill, then we can actually look to cut the US national debt by $16 trillion. Now, again, initially, I was quite skeptical about this. How would holding so many Bitcoin cut the US debt, which is at $36 trillion. But then I kind of had the epiphany. And the epiphany is very simple. It is very similar to MicroStrategy's model. So just think about a world like this. If the US does actually introduce a strategic reserve, right? Then what happens is every other country starts to follow them because you can't not follow, you can't fall behind in a race of a strategic reserve. Just think about the days where all international trade was backed by gold, right? And so you could not be caught not having enough gold. So then what happens is you get a whole lot of other countries which start to FOMO in and try and beat or join the United States. What that does is it pushes the price of Bitcoin up. As it pushes the price of Bitcoin up, the value of the US strategic reserve actually goes up. And so now what you have is you have this huge strategic reserve, which is, say, valued at first $1 trillion, then maybe $2 trillion, then maybe $3 trillion. They're talking about accumulating 1 million Bitcoin. Okay, just to give you some perspective. So assuming the US accumulate 1 million Bitcoin, that is, I think, 600 or 60 billion? 60 billion. That is a $60 billion market cap. But the minute that other nations start rushing in, because then it becomes a national race to accumulate as many of this reserve asset as possible, that pushes up the value of the strategic reserve. Now, when the value of the strategic reserve goes up, effectively, the debt is now backed by a hard asset. So almost, if you want to think about it as gold, imagine that the US had 36 billion of national debts and no gold. And then all of a sudden, the value of the gold in the US's vault went up to 36 trillion. What it would allow is it would allow the US to continue to borrow money so that they could carry on buying Bitcoin. And so what you get is you get a world where the US devalues its dollar and uses these dollars to buy more Bitcoin and creates this Saylor style strategy because they are the first major power to actually do this. And so initially I thought, like, this is garbage. This can't happen. But it turns out that it's actually not garbage. And I'm not the first person that actually thought about this. Michael Saylor also did.
In the 20th century aren't money. Currency is money, but currency is not a good capital asset. Post-Satoshi, all of a sudden, we have a money which is a capital asset, which is Bitcoin. And now, the significance of what's going on with the strategic Bitcoin reserve is the United States is going to own the world's reserve capital network, Bitcoin. We're going to mine Bitcoin. The Bitcoin miners run the world reserve capital network. Bitcoin holders own the world reserve capital. If you want a prescription for prosperity in the 21st century, there's no better prescription than to own the world's reserve capital, run the world's reserve capital network, benefit from the growth of the world's reserve capital asset. And the logic from the United States point of view is we already run the world reserve currency. Now we'll own the world's reserve capital network. If people ever recapitalize their
So basically, I mean, Trump did actually come out before the elections and he said, "Oh, we'll just pay back the debt using Bitcoin." And now you're starting to realize that actually maybe he wasn't so wrong after all, because if he does own Bitcoin, potentially that could actually happen. So I did tweet about this and I said, Trump joked about actually doing this, but maybe it wasn't such a joke. And now what you're starting to see is nations actually start the adoption. So, we've been through the crypto normies, we've been through the big individuals, we've been through the institutions who have just started. The states are now starting to come in, and now you're getting countries. Started off obviously with small countries, which were like Bhutan and El Salvador. But now you're seeing that the Polish president is saying that if he gets reelected, he's going to start a strategic reserve. And then obviously China and Russia would kind of have to follow. And then eventually this whole thing actually happens. And it's kind of happening right now before our eyes. So as I said to you in the beginning of the show, I said, look, I don't know what your targets are for Bitcoin, but when you put all these pieces together, and they are actually happening. So these are not like theoreticals that may or may not happen one day in 10 years. They're talking about getting it done in the first 100 days. And so that's why I was so confident in the beginning of the show to say, whatever your target is, double it. My target was, say, 200,000, double it to 400,000, double that to 800,000. I still think that is extremely, extremely, extremely conservative. And you can also see that people are starting to realize the value and the importance of Bitcoin. I read two things here which actually show this. For the first time ever, holding one Bitcoin is more than the US average retirement savings, believe it or not. So people are not, hold on, if you can just accumulate one Bitcoin, that would be more than the average. And this is now. Imagine if this adoption curve actually happens. Another good stat here is that if you look at the value of the before tax family income of all families, the Bitcoin price is actually higher. So that is the thesis. That's why I'm so confident that whatever your target is, I don't think your target is bullish enough. And I don't think that, as I said, I am cutting down, but I would never, ever, ever cut down on my Bitcoin exposure and specifically not today, because I just think that today we could get that options gamma squeeze that could actually happen. So look out for it. But I mean, there are a couple of other plays that are probably worth looking at. I mean, one is you could look at like the Bitcoin layer 2s. I do think that Stacks may actually have a good run very soon. They are changing the design of their network, so to speak. And there's an upgrade that is live now, but it's going to go properly live. But that's going to make a very good Bitcoin layer 2. I then think we're going to have like a whole movement of these Bitcoin layer 2. So Stacks is going to usher it in, but then there's Build on Bitcoin, there's Babylon Chain. Then you have a network called the GOAT network, which is another Bitcoin layer 2, which uses Bitcoin. So I think that this will become a whole movement. And then I think we're going to get like a meme coin super cycle on Bitcoin. And I think that meme coin super cycle on Bitcoin is actually starting to happen right now. If you look at Kaito, if you look at there's the whole rune narrative that's actually starting to run, runes versus ordinals. And I think what we'll do is we'll do a whole show around like what the difference is between the runes and the ordinals. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of like the difference between an NFT and a meme coin. So an ordinal is a unique inscription on each Satoshi, right? And the runes are fungible, and it's non-fungible. It's like an NFT. And then the runes are the fungible ones. So you've got like an NFT market, and you've got a runes, which is a meme coin market, so to speak, on Bitcoin. And there's actually a lot of like plays here in both of these markets, right? So like, you know, there's the dog, there's Pups, there's Wizard, there's a whole lot of others. And I think what we'll do is later in the week, we'll actually do a show on these, because I do think that there's going to be a much bigger Bitcoin narrative. And I do think that there's something that there's something over there that you probably need to look at. Cool. So that's why I'm so confident that, you know, that's why I actually did a Bitcoin show today, because I just thought like this was, you know, really like something that we had to pay attention to, because Bitcoin is actually the big daddy. Now, truth is, if you love the show, first of all, smash the like button. Also, if you want to be part of the research team, great bunch of researchers that actually helped me with all this research. And you've been in crypto for over 3 years, like since 2021. If you watch more than 3 crypto shows a day, if you want to go full-time crypto and earn a full-time salary, if you can work European or Singapore hours, and if you want to work with like the #1 company or the #1 research, but you also need to know a little bit about crypto. Like you need to know the difference between Solana and Sui, for example. If you meet these criteria, then what I suggest you do is that there's a link below. Sign up using that link below, and then come and see if you can make it into our, let me actually show you the link so that you can see what it is. Let's quickly just go there. Here it is. Okay, let's quickly go to it. Yeah. So there's a few links below that I think are probably worth looking at. The first thing is, if you want to get 10% off your trading fees for the year, then my suggestion is sign up using any of these links. Also, tomorrow I'm going to start a trading account on Blowfin, and we're going to go and play the competition. But again, I think super important is to look at the researcher thing. Okay, I see the researcher thing isn't here, but let's put the researcher application form for anyone who wants to be a researcher. Yeah, so that's it. I mean, that's the stuff on Bitcoin. I do think that you should look at the Bitcoin L2s, the Stacks, the GOAT networks. Even there's an old protocol called Elastos, which is a link below. Go and have a look at it, because I think we'll also spend some time talking about that. Yeah, let me know what you thought of the show. Let me know if you are as excited as I am. I will see you guys again tomorrow. I mean, bullish as hell. Let's see if any of the price predictions actually happen. I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Until then, trade well, my friends.